No joke, your mindset about getting older can mean up to 7.5 years of additional life if you have a positive view about getting older. That is research from Yale professor Becca Levy. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. And what was just mind-boggling to me about this is that it had more impact on you than cessation of smoking, exercise, your nutrition, like all of these different factors that you would think would be so instrumental in your longevity. No, the way you think and perceive getting older makes all the difference, which blows my mind too, because women have such a hard time with getting older because of the beauty industry. Thanks a lot. Thanks for nothing. But we still have a longer trajectory than most men. It's crazy. Welcome to It Gets Late Early. I am so proud. It has been 1.5 years of the show. 1.5 years. And it went by like that. So, time flies when you're having fun and all that stuff. But I can't begin to thank you guys enough for being here. This show, I don't know if you've noticed, but recently things are just like blowing up. Like everybody is tuning in and talking about age in a way that I had always dreamed about, but wondered when we'd get there because we have such an ageist society and we're so obsessed with youth. But we're here and we're growing, and it's because of you. And thank you, because our collective voices are making a huge difference. And I'm going to share some of the ways in which they've done so in this episode. But this episode today, it's really like a retrospective analysis of all the things, well, not all, but plenty of the things that I have learned over the course of doing this show. And I have learned a lot. So we're only going to kind of scratch the surface of that. But I tried to distill what I learned into essentially like 10 things that I learned in the course of making this show. I thought about calling the show 10 Things I Hate About Ageism, but I'm like going to pull back a little bit because actually some of the stuff that I'm going to share with you is really hopeful, good information. So yay, hope. We like hope. So I can't wait to dive into this episode. Just a few things to note. First of all, just want to let you guys know I'm going to take a quick hiatus, a little holiday break from releasing new episodes. So the month of December, the month of January, there's going to be no more new episodes. So just in advance, wanted to let you know that I'll be going quiet for a little while on this particular podcast feed. That said, I'm sure I will still be very active on social media, which has been so much fun and actually has been a huge part of what's driven growth for the show. So thank you to those of you who follow, especially on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's been the best for growing the show. So thank you for those of you who are there, being a part of the conversation, and actually driving change. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Also, just a little teaser. At the end of the show, I'm going to be sharing some pretty cool news about what's happening in my world and some things that are coming around the corner, as well as a special invitation for you in the audience. So without further ado, let's dive into the 10 things that I have learned about ageism and getting older in the workplace over the course of doing this show. All right, lesson number 1. Ageism is real. So when I had this idea for the show, I thought to myself, is this something that we're kind of like making up in our heads? Is everything actually fine? I mean, you don't hear that much about it, right? Because it just wasn't really discussed commonly in society. So I thought perhaps this is something I'm kind of like, I don't know, borrowing trouble from the future, right? Like maybe the up or out thing isn't real. Everyone must be fine. I don't know. It's real. Okay. So this is happening and people are really getting hurt by ageism in this society. And it's the one thing that's coming for all of us. And so we should get our heads around this and start doing something. So it's real. I read so many studies and surveys that would indicate that ageism is real. Some of the more recent ones include one by Resume Now that said that 90% of people who completed this survey had experienced age discrimination. 90%. That's wild. AARP came out with recent information as well, and 2 out of 3 respondents over 50 said that they had seen age discrimination. And actually, about 90% of them described age discrimination as either somewhat common or very common. So this is abounding in our society. People are seeing it all over the place. It's happening. It's real. Don't gaslight yourself. It's real. beyond the survey data, which tends to be more on sort of the side of sentiment and how people are feeling, is the raw data that we got from the EEOC. So thank you, hat tip to the EEOC. Back in 2014, they put out a survey that they put out a research report that talked all about diversity in the high-tech industry. And at that time, 2014, they said essentially that age was an underrepresented factor in the industry and that it, quote, needed to be studied more. But then nothing happened until this year, a decade later, when they put out another report. And that one was called High Tech Low Inclusion, which is like the sickest burn. And they talked all about the ways in which tech is failing us when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And they included age. They had a whole section on age. And folks, it says exactly what you think it says, right? It says that things are bad in the tech industry. So while our population continues to age, more on that later, our representation of people over age 40 in the tech industry is actually going down. So back in 2014, we were 55.9% of the tech workforce. And now in 2022, which was when the study concluded, it's 52.1%. So we're sliding down even as the population gets older. So it's exactly as we expected. Also, the tech industry is employing people under age 25 at a rate that's essentially like 9x the growth than across all US industries. So there's definitely still that preference for young talent in the tech industry. And there are all sorts of reasons why that is. And I think we know plenty of them. But anyhow, that's happening. And then also over 65, the rate at which that is growing for the tech industry is markedly slower than it is across all US industry. So a lot more people over age 65 entering the workforce, going back into the workforce after maybe early or forced retirement. But that growth rate in the tech industry lags behind that of the national average across all industry. So still, again, that preference for youth. So these surveys that talk about, how do you feel about ageism in the industry? Now we have raw data underpinning it. So we're not making it up. This is real. Don't gaslight yourself for a second longer. Ageism in tech is a huge problem. All right. So the second thing that I learned about ageism is that it gets all of us. Like no one is immune, and it gets all of us at least once, if not twice. And the lucky ones get it twice. And some of us, we get it through our entire lives. What am I talking about? Okay, first of all, ageism does go both ways. There is such a thing as what people consider reverse ageism, which is ageism and ageist beliefs and discrimination and bias against people because of their relative youth. That's very much a thing. Gen Z does not have it great. I know that none of us do, but Gen Z, there's been a lot that's come out in the news lately about hiring managers who will say that they have a bias against hiring younger people, that they will, I think it was 6 in 10 hiring managers said that they had fired a Gen Z person within 6 months of employment. And a lot of those people actually indicated that they were no longer interested in hiring people from Gen Z because they thought various things, right? Like they weren't quick enough on the job, they didn't work hard enough, etc. All of these, again, are really just like generational stereotypes that are so bad. And we all have to fight against them and push against them. In my view, it's just as bad to be, stereotyping younger people as it is older people. It's not okay to do for people of any age. And, we just need to work on this, right? As hopefully everybody in this audience understands, the value is in having a multi-generational workforce. We need to have people younger and older, both. We need to have mentors and mentees. And that doesn't necessarily have to go, older people passing wisdom down, right? Like I learn a ton from younger people as well. I absolutely adore younger people. They teach me so much. And, I in turn teach them. So anyhow, the bottom line is we really need to have a conversation about these generational stereotypes, and we need to stop doing it both to younger people and older people alike. All right, the third thing that I learned about ageism and getting older is that this has far-ranging consequences much bigger than the workplace. What do I mean by that? Okay, guess what? Did you know that the way you think about aging can actually be the difference between more life or an earlier death? Like, no joke, your mindset about getting older can mean up to 7.5 years of additional life if you have a positive view about getting older. That is research from Yale professor Becca Levy. Crazy, absolutely crazy. And what was just mind-boggling to me about this is that it had more impact on you than cessation of smoking, exercise, your nutrition, like all of these different factors that you would think would be so instrumental in your longevity. No, the way you think and perceive getting older makes all the difference, which blows my mind too, because women have such a hard time with getting older because of the beauty industry. Thanks a lot. Thanks for nothing. But we still have a longer trajectory than most men. It's crazy. So this is a matter of literally life and death. And we have such a completely deeply embedded ageism in our society. It's internalized, right? Think of how many times recently you've heard someone say, for example, I'm aging myself. People say that all the time. They make light of their age as though it's bad. And the reality is, if we don't turn that around, we might be shortchanging ourselves on more life. Crazy. So I can't impress on you enough the importance of getting this right. And our society does not get this right. So I had the misfortune of having to watch Alvin and the Chipmunks, the remake on Netflix recently. Oh my gosh. So my kids were watching it and my ears I just perked up when I heard this because I was like, oh my God, what are we teaching our kids? Okay. So the plot line was essentially that Dave, the father of Alvin and the Chipmunks, was nominated for what the Chipmunks thought was called a granny. Okay. And the Chipmunks assumed that Dave, this music producer or whatever, was thinking he was nominated for a Grammy. And they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? This is so embarrassing for him. He's going to just be devastated that he's considered, for a Granny award because that's so lame and he's so old and it's just going to kill him, right? They flipped. And the whole time at the end of this, right, they were trying to thwart his approach to the Granny Awards, which he thought was the Grammy Awards. And so they were gluing his tuxedo to something. They were hiding his keys to his car. They were doing everything they could to prevent Dave from showing up at the Granny Awards and being humiliated for the sin of being old, right? And it turns out in the show, all along, Dave knew it was a Granny award. He knew he was up for this achievement award for people who were older, and he was chill with it. But the Chipmunks were like, oh my gosh, he's so old, we can't let him know. This was baked into the whole show. And I was horrified. And I'm like, this is how it happens, right? Because the reality is kids as young as age 4 spout off harmful ageist stereotypes. And I kept thinking to myself, how do they learn this? It's the media. We're teaching them. This is such a problem. So especially with the way things are moving in our society, the demographic change, we need to cut this out, okay? All right, that last one got me a little bit fired up, but honestly, this has a widespread impact on all of us. It's not a nothing burger. We can't just shove it under the rug. We have to address this for our sake and the sake of all who come after us, right? So number 4, the fourth thing that I learned about getting older at work, it's costing companies money, cold, hard cash, okay? So the AARP did research, and they found that the estimated cost to potential GDP in the United States, $850 billion hit because of ageism. That is the cost of people getting forced out of the labor market before they want or need to retire. That is what it's going to hurt our economy if we can't get a handle on ageism. Massive dollars, okay? Nearly $1 trillion, really. So it's not nothing. All right, so we all know that companies care about productivity, right? That's one of the markers for success. And one of our past show guests, actually, Dr. Daniel Jollis from the London School of Economics, he's an inclusion researcher. And he, alongside the consulting company Protiviti, have been doing a lot of research on the multi-generational productivity potential of teams. And they found a lot of really interesting data. I actually was able to go to a launch party for their latest round of research, which was all about meetings and having multi-generational representation at meetings. Super cool. But he's found, and he and his team have found a lot of information that supports the fact that there's higher productivity when you have multi-generational representation. We're still at a place where, as of the latest research from PwC, only 8% of companies out there that have DEIB programs, only 8% of them actually include age as a factor. That's a huge miss. And the findings that the Protivity team and London School of Economics Inclusion Initiative found are pretty interesting. So they found that 25% of employees self-report low productivity, which is a bummer. But they found that actually when you have a multi-generational group represented at that organization, that self-reporting actually drops to just 13%. So that's a big shift just by having people across different age ranges at your company, right? And also having intergenerationally inclusive work practices. Employees actually reduce the self-reports of low productivity for younger workers even more. So when you have that representation, it goes from 37% for younger workers down to 18%. That's Gen Z. So Gen Z says, hey, if you have people across all generations, my productivity goes up like essentially 20%, right? Which is wild. And then for millennials, it's going from 30% down to 13%. So shout out to the millennials. And then for Gen X, it's 22% down to 13% self-reporting. So this actually has like really strong implications for what we can expect for productivity. And so companies need to understand that there are actual dollars attached to having a multi-generational workforce. And so if you don't do that, you are leaving money on the table. And that is quite literally the only way this is going to change, because we all know that companies care above all about increasing shareholder value. So if you can't get more money by employing people across different generations, they're just not going to do it. And they're going to axe the older workers, right? So I'm really thrilled that Protivity and the Inclusion Initiative at London School of Economics, Dr. Daniel Jolles, and all of them are doing this important work, because this is how we're going to get things to change. This is it. So huge shout out to them. Shout out to AARP for doing this research, because ultimately I really believe this is what's going to borrow a really annoying corporate term, move the needle on ageism and age inclusion. Also, for those of you who haven't listened to Dr. Daniel Jolles' episode of It Gets Late Early, don't miss out. He talks all about the value of older workers, and it's an important episode. It was early on. It was our 4th episode ever. So go back and have a listen to that. It's again, the 4th episode, but we can link it in the show notes below. And also, heads up, Daniel will be coming back to speak with me again about their research with the generations survey that I just referenced, some of that data. So he's going to come back and actually share with us more of that, as well as include the very latest findings from their survey, which was all about the importance of having multi-generational representation at meetings. So it's all about how to make meetings suck less, which is, as you know, someone who used to work in corporate, pretty critically important. So we'll get into that in the future in 2025, and I can't wait for it. All right, so the 5th thing I learned about getting older in the workplace is that essentially women's health is being completely ignored. So as I covered on my episode a couple episodes back with menopause advocate and influencer Tamsin Fadal, we're just like not talking about something that impacts 51% of the population and has a huge impact on companies, right? And that means like a hit to their productivity, a hit to their money, right? So we covered a lot of this in the episode, a few back. I'll link it in the show notes as well, but just a few quick stats for you. So there are 50 million women in the American workforce. It's a lot of people. And them going through something that could, symptoms that could last for literally a span of 20 years, like without question, there is a woman at every organization, probably in corporate, who is going through either perimenopause or menopause. And that means that she has some health concerns that you should be able to support. Right? It's important. So, for example, in this episode, we cover this too. Hot flashes alone allegedly are costing, due to some research, are costing about $330 million to companies. And that equates to about like $1,300 a woman. So there is a financial cost associated with all of this, which is pretty staggering. And we should 100% figure out how to support our colleagues so that they can be their best selves in the office. And I stand by my statement. If this happened to dudes, we would be focusing on it a little bit more than we are. I'm seeing some positive signs that we are starting to care about this. There's a lot more advocacy and conversation around this. I mean, some of you may remember Halle Berry at the Capitol yelling out, "I'm in menopause." Like, people are talking about it. It is much more mainstream. And so now the next step is to ensure that we bring this subject into the workplace in a way that is very respectful and that has impact in the right way, not the way that I experienced it at a past tech startup. So if you want to hear that insane story that you just like, you can't make it up, go back to that episode with Tamsin Fadal, the menopause advocate, as well as my own personal horrific tech story. So make sure you check that one out. I'll link it in the show notes. All right, we are plowing through this. Number 6, the number 6 on this list of the 10 things that I've learned. Demographic change means we have to focus on this issue of ageism now. What do I mean by that? Our general population, our demographics are shifting rapidly. You've probably heard the not so fabulous term, the silver tsunami. Well, that means that we're getting older really quickly, right? So some stats for you to understand exactly the pace with which we are aging, generally speaking, demographically. So in 2020, there were 55.8 million people 65 and over in the United States, which was 16.8% of the total population. This is up 38.6% from 40.3 million in 2010. That is how quickly this is happening. Okay. Big jump. And the share of the population age 65 and over more than doubled from 1940 to 2020, from less than 7% to nearly 17%. Also, fun fact, our grandparents lived 30 years fewer on this earth than we do now on average. 30 years. Human longevity is expanding at a huge clip, and this has massive implications for the workforce. A lot of people over age 65 are coming back into the workforce after early or forced retirement, right? This isn't exactly something to celebrate all the time. Sometimes people really want to come back and contribute for all the various reasons that working adds to your life, right? Like, a lot of people actually enjoy what they do and they want to come back to the workplace, but there are just as many, if not more, that are coming back because of financial constraints and the need to earn more money because we're living longer, right? So something's got to give. And this is a huge problem. And I want to invite anyone who's interested in this topic, which is so incredibly important, to go back and listen to an earlier episode of mine with Bradley Sherman. He is a demographic change strategist. He worked with AARP for many years and then founded his own consultancy, which is called Human Change. He is also the author of a book called The Super Age, Decoding Our Demographic Destiny. And he is now a friend. He's fantastic. And he has a lot of insights that he drops on that particular episode. So I highly encourage anyone who wants to learn more about that subject to go back to that episode. It will be linked in the show notes. But long story short, TLDR, we're getting older really quickly. We have to figure out how we change and we adapt and reduce our ageist beliefs so that we can include all the people that we will need of the older demographic to do the roles that we need filled. Companies, this is a mandate. It's not just a nice to have. You have to fix your age problem now. We need to make our companies multi-generational, and we need to make them open and able to support the needs of older people. This is a mandate. All right, guys, we're up to 7. Number 7. The laws might technically be in our favor over age 40, but they're not really working. That's what I've learned. It's a bit grim. So for those of you who don't know, since the ADEA, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967, it has been federally illegal to discriminate against those age 40 and over in the United States of America. Some states actually have more than that. They protect people at various ages. They protect people at all ages, which I think is fantastic. And I wish more states would adopt that. However, so far, all I can tell that act has protected me from is essentially unsolicited emails from recruiters asking me to apply for roles at their companies. No joke. From the moment I hit 40, the usual inbound solicitations from recruiters just dropped off a cliff, like as in they did not happen anymore. I don't think that is a coincidence. I've heard that from many, many other people out there. It's a thing, okay? So there might be this law, but there are many ways around it. And why is that? Well, as I've learned in multiple episodes from working with and talking to attorneys who work with employment discrimination and employment law, it's because age discrimination is the hardest type of discrimination case to prove. That is because of an interpretation of law in the Supreme Court that happened in the 90s. And essentially what it means is that age discrimination now is the, quote, but for cause. You have to prove that age was the sole reason and not part of a mixed motive. Like, oh, it was a little bit of age, it was a little bit of gender, it was a little bit of race. It has to be the only reason that you either didn't get a job or were fired or were actually prevented from advancing in your career. The only reason. As you can imagine, that is exceptionally difficult to prove. Okay? So that's where we are. So the law exists, yes. We have protection, allegedly, and yet it is incredibly difficult to prove. And I want to throw all of you back to one of my recent episodes with Amelia Dansica. She is the founder of Growth Molecules, and she worked at a prior startup. She's not naming it. She's keeping it super above board, and hats off to her. No scorched earth. But she was fired after 13 quarters of actually outperforming her goals. And actually her company gave her additional options because she was doing such a good job. And out of nowhere, her probably 15-year younger CEO had someone else come from outside of the country, from their headquarters, to fire her. And they said, and I quote, "We want fresh blood in your seat." She was 42. She was fired for being 42. And yet when she sought counsel from the best age discrimination lawyers in San Francisco, they all told her, sign the NDA, take the severance, take the settlement, and not settlement, but take the severance agreement and sign it, or you'll probably never work in tech again, right? You're not going to win this case, and no one's going to touch you with a 10-foot pole. That's the reality of the world in which we live today when it comes to age discrimination, which is why so many people just suck it up and don't say anything. And, Amelia's story has a very happy ending. She's doing incredible work now. She's actually helping and employing a ton of older workers. But a lot of people don't have that same fabulous success story out of it, right? There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of hurt. You can hear Amelia's story. We'll link it in the show notes. It's something that impacts so many people. So anyhow, there is a real cost to what's going on. Now, I also will say that we don't know what we don't know. And there is a huge lack of education on age discrimination and what you can do about it, what your rights are. Like, employees just simply don't know. And it's no one's fault. There's just not enough awareness on this topic. I've learned that, right? So I actually kind of blended 7 and 8 there because, started talking. But bottom line for number 7, the laws exist, but they aren't entirely sufficient. Right now, there is bipartisan legislation in the works, which is great. I'm not sure exactly where it stands right now in our justice system, but the idea is that we will reduce the we will reduce the burden of proof to that of other discrimination cases when it comes to age, so that it's easier to prove an age discrimination case, that it's not such a high bar. So I'm hopeful that that actually gets passed. Beyond that, there was another law that actually passed just in 2024, July of 2024, in the state of Colorado, and that's called the Job Application Fairness Act. And what it does is it actually makes sure that nobody in the state of Colorado can ask an applicant any age indicators, right? So I'm talking year of graduation, year of birth, that years of experience even. I'm not sure about that one. I'll have to double check. That's the subject of a future episode. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to have Janine Vanderberg, who is part of the group that actually got this put into law in the state of Colorado. So shout out to Janine. She's at Changing the Narrative and has been doing some incredible anti-ageism activism for a long time now. So she'll be on the show to talk about what they did in Colorado. And honestly, I hope we can inspire other states to do the very same thing. So the Job Application Fairness Act protects people at the applicant stage to ensure that they don't have age bias come into the equation. And for those who don't know, age bias is such a massive problem. There was a recent article in the Financial Times in the UK that suggested that about half of recruiters said that age 57, quote, too old to hire. I'm sorry, excuse me, recruiters? Recruiters think that? That's a huge problem. They're the people in HR that we count on to do the right thing. And even they don't know that age bias is wrong. What a problem, right? Not only that, there was another Resume Now survey that suggested 42% of hiring managers would cop to having age bias. So that's against age young, too young and too old, right? But 42% of hiring managers. I would expect that from hiring managers. In fact, I'm shocked that the hiring managers reported findings were lower in percentage than recruiters. But all of this is to say it's a systemic issue and people don't even know that ageism is wrong. So we need to be doing a lot more work there. So again, laws exist. The EEOC is there to help people, but the onus is placed on the actual victim of age discrimination. The EEOC is not going to do anything without people coming forward and actually filing a claim. Then they have to go and tell you whether your claim is valid or not in their estimation. And at that point, again, it's on you to fight the corporation. So our laws and our systems right now really hurt the little guy. They hurt the individual employee and job seeker. That's just where we are. I don't like it at all. I think it needs to change really quickly, but that's where we are. So that's the state of age discrimination. I have 2 episodes all about that, with two incredible employment lawyers and one with the outgoing, unfortunately, he's left the EEOC, but Keith Sonderling, the former commissioner of the EEOC. 2 episodes. I'll link those there. Please go look. It's really important. Okay. Which leads into point 8. So I kind of blended these two. So forgive me, ADHD here, trying to figure out these systems and processes. Anyway, number 8, the 8th thing I've learned is essentially we need so much more education about age in the workplace and your rights. People don't know what they don't know. And guess who takes advantage of that? You guessed it, employers. Okay. My DMs were blowing up. I got so many emails and messages about people who had what they thought was an age-related layoff or firing. And what was so disturbing about this outreach from people was how often people had no idea the information to which they were entitled by law. So there's something called the Older Workers Benefit Protection Act, which tells you that any company that has over, I believe it's 100 employees, if they are doing a layoff, they need to provide those who are laid off with a list of the titles and the ages in their department of those whom were laid off, as well as the titles and the ages of those who remained in the organization. Let me tell you, I know people who did not receive that document who should have. I know people who were given incomplete lists and accounting of people at their organization. People who saw, some rando from a different department pulled in to this group where things were shifted, maybe somewhat prior, like very, suspiciously near to the date of the layoff, right? They were shifted around so as to kind of throw people off as to whether or not age was a part of the equation. There were people who literally weren't in their department, right? Like there were people who got backdated agreements from when they were fired, and let go. all sorts of really sketchy stuff. And I'm sorry, these companies know. They know the law. And what I saw with my own eyes in some cases was super disturbing because these companies are banking on you not knowing your rights. They're banking on you not going to a lawyer. They are banking on you not knowing that you have 45 days to review these papers. If you're over age 40 and you get separation papers, if you're laid off, you have 45 days to go and talk to an attorney to identify whether or not age was a part of your layoff. People don't know that. Companies know that when you get laid off, you're in a state of shock. You are upset. You are concerned about keeping a roof over your head, putting food on the table, paying for, the other people in your family, your kids, whatever. And they don't think you're going to go find an attorney. They don't think that you're going to catch them, right? And so they do this stuff. And people just don't know. They don't know. They want the pay. It's almost blackmail, honestly. It's almost corporate blackmail. And people just sign the agreement because they need money. And this is how the little guy is disadvantaged. And it infuriates me because people are getting hosed, right? People are getting screwed. And so I'm on a mission to make sure that people know their rights. Now, I am not an attorney. Take everything I say with a grain of salt, but do hear me now. Like, go see an attorney if you think age had something to do with your layoff. Please. Because if you don't know what you don't know, people can continue taking advantage of you. And that's what a lot of these, I shouldn't say a lot, but that's what some of these companies are doing, right? They're exploiting you. Don't let it happen on your watch. If you're over 40, seek counsel. It might cost you a little bit of money, but you will know that you did what you could, okay? So please, that's my plea to everybody. Make sure you don't sign that severance agreement. Don't sign that NDA before you talk to an attorney, okay? Whew. Yeah. Again, so many sketchy things being reported to me. I'm not an attorney. I don't practice in any of the states in which these people worked, but there were very, very weird things happening at huge tech companies, the names of which you would all know, where people were not being provided complete information. This stuff happened. People reach out to me constantly with this stuff, guys. And it's truly upsetting. But again, that's why I'm so passionate about this, because I know it's happening and I know a lot of people are getting caught up in it. So please see an attorney. Oh, all right. Which leads me into the ninth thing I've learned. All right. And it's something that actually is not being reported. And I don't completely know why. I suspect it's that the data is hard to get at because, for example, yours truly tried to get the data. I put a Freedom of Information Act out there to the EEOC. I asked them for layoff data as it relates to age, and they say they don't have it. That seems weird to me because it seems that it should be somewhere. If it's not their department, if it's not their arm of the government agency, it has to be elsewhere, right? Because we all give our social security number and our birth date to our employers. And certainly we're often asked what our age is when we even apply to companies. So again, it's just strange to me that this doesn't exist. I feel like it has to be somewhere. But anyway, I did do the Freedom of Information Act. I was denied. They said they didn't have the data. But guys, we all know this, right? These layoffs are impacting older people at a higher clip. It's a disproportionate impact on people over age 40. Talk to your friends, look around, look at your department. We know this, okay? And you know what? Some of it's not ageism. Some of it is pure cost cutting, plain and simple. And I would really urge people who are crying afoul and saying it's ageism to think before you speak. Because if you say it's ageism and it's cost cutting, unfortunately, it creates a chilling effect when there actually is ageism involved. Okay. So older workers often have more experience. And with experience, understandably, and as it should be, comes more pay. So when people are looking at a spreadsheet and they're trying to cut costs, guess who's kind of hung out to dry? Older workers, right? So you cannot allege age discrimination without more of a base to your claim. And when you do not do that, You heard all of us. So please don't do that. Okay. There are other things that have to be in place for it to be age discrimination, other than it just happens to have targeted people who tend to make more money. If people who are younger than you are getting paid more and yet you're laid off, that's a little suspicious, or sus, as maybe my Gen Z friends would say. But you need more. You need a consistent pattern of ageism in order to prove it. You need your superior saying, man, lots of gray hair in here, or aren't you ready to retire? Or gosh, we really need someone fresh, young, hungry. Like, you need more. And so please don't allege that unless you see more. Now, all of that is to say, I think it's very frustrating that it may be so that older workers are targeted for layoffs. I think that companies are really missing the mark. I think they are going to watch a lot of incredible talent and experience walk out the door, and I think that's going to hurt them. And unfortunately, we don't live in a world where they get that until they see how it hurts the bottom line. So, for example, all these RTO layoffs, as I call them, which are basically quiet layoffs where companies are like, you know what, we got to get rid of people because we need to, have efficiency, the year of efficiency, like at Meta, or we need to cut a lot of people, but how about we do this? How about we tell everybody they have to come back to the office, and it's probably going to mean some people won't come back. And then we'll save the money, and then we save the hit to PR, right? Like, it doesn't look as bad to be like, hey, we told people to come back and they didn't, right? Versus like, oh, we had massive layoffs. That looks bad. That looks like your financial health of the company is not good and it might scare investors, et cetera. So I get why companies do it, but also I fully believe that they know that the people who are going to be impacted more and the most likely people to walk away are going to be older workers. Why? Because older workers, especially if they relocated during COVID, quite likely might be in a stage of life where they have children, where they have roots. Maybe they're caring for older relatives in a community. And they're not as apt to just be like, cool, I'll come in 5 days a week. I'll come in 3 days a week when you told me I didn't have to. They're probably going to walk, and they probably have a better network. And so they think they're going to get another job, right? So there are all these different facets to this situation. But the bottom line is older workers are being impacted by these layoffs and by these RTO mandates, and no one's talking about it. It's not being covered. And so I'm covering it here, and I'm calling it now. Older workers, when all of the dust settles, the reality is going to show, the data is going to show, and I'll tell you if I'm wrong, but I'm calling it now. The reality will show that older workers were targeted in these layoffs, and that they are going to be leaving at a disproportionate rate to everyone else. Calling it now. All right. We've reached number 10. We're there, guys. And this is kind of like a big one to tackle in one. So 2 things. 10th thing I've learned. You can get a job if you are older in corporate and in tech. You can. It's possible. And there is a lot of reason to hope. And our voices have a lot of power. So let's cover that big group of things in number 10. So I want to let you guys know it's rough out there. The stuff that I hear often breaks my heart. It's real. Ageism's real. I have highly qualified people in my audience who are barely getting by and who are frankly on the verge of depression, if not already there. Some of them are about to lose their home. Some of them are desperate. It's not okay. It's horrible. So I want to call that out. But I also want to tell you there's reason for hope. And I say that because I know quite a few people in my audience who, even recently, when we're all thinking things are going terribly and where no one's hiring and blah, 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 even recently have reached out to say, guess what? I got a job. You know what? The common thread through pretty much, I think, everyone who has reached out, the common thread is that they got a job through their network. They got a job because of their age, if you think about it, right? Because one thing that we have over time is we know people. We know a lot of people. We know people who were partners. We know people who were customers. We know people who were coworkers. We know past bosses. We know so many people, and all of those people get to know you. They get to know your personality. They get to know your work ethic. They get to know your skills, your strengths, etc. And they want to help you. That's something that's a huge boon to older workers, and we forget it. Younger workers don't have that benefit. I actually feel for them. They don't know as many people, especially Gen Z just getting into the workforce. They're kind of stuck with the network that they had from growing up, and they're just lucky if that happens to include people of, influence for them, right? But if you've worked for a while, your age is an asset. And again, it gets back to that mindset that I was talking about the positive view of aging. If you think when you're going into an interview, oh man, they're going to think I'm too old, I could be their parent, grandparent, whatever, guess what? That is going to translate in your interview. You will look insecure. You will look like you're apologizing for yourself. Damn it, no. Your age is an asset. Your experience is an asset. Own it. Own it. Yes, people will be biased against you for your age. It's true. We all know that. But you can't control that. What you can control is how you show up, okay? So the people who have reached out to me and said they've gotten a job, they've persisted. And again, I'm not taking away from anyone who's experiencing a really difficult period. Your situation is real. But I just want to show you there's a little hope, because these people are finding jobs that might take them sadly, a very long time, but they're getting there. And I really believe that most of us will too. And I wish I could say all. I truly do. I really desperately want to. I care so much. But, our system sucks. Our system sucks. People suck. We're biased, and we need to work on it. But please take that sliver of hope. I mean, in the last couple weeks alone, I've had at least 5 people reach out and be like, I got a job, Maureen. Been looking for like 6 months, 8 months, a year, whatever. But I got a job. Or, you know what? I decided to go out on my own, and I got my first client, and I'm going to do this new thing. So please take that sliver of hope, because we all need it. I also want to share that we as a community collectively have made change happen. Like, I am so proud of us for speaking up. If you have tuned in for a while, you know about what happened with Indeed, the largest job site on earth, that should really know better. They had a crazily ageist career guide. They had everybody's career defined by age bands. And they had 45 to 55 bracketed as late career. And then 55 plus was, quote, decline. Chris Hyams, their CEO, 56, he's in decline. Ridiculous. They suggested that you should look for a successor once you're in your 40s, that, once you're in your 50s, you should stop learning. It was ludicrous. Please check out that episode. You won't believe it. But I bring this up because I made a post on LinkedIn, and it went viral, as did those of many other people, mostly in the UK, actually, where I think they have it a little bit to get more together on anti-ageism than we do. But these posts collectively got Indeed to reach out specifically to me and others. And they said they were sorry, and they accepted responsibility, and they pulled that guide that had been on their website for over a year, which is crazy. I actually was super close to getting someone on the show from Indeed. I had the chief marketing officer, Jessica Jensen. She was like, I'd like to come. And we were trying to coordinate her or someone else showing up on the show. But then their comms team, their external PR firm, was like, yeah, they're not showing up. So anyway, but we did that, guys. We did that. We said, this is ridiculous. And they changed it, right? I'd love to know whether it was more than just like a public mea culpa, or whether they had actual systemic change within the organization. I had DMs coming in to me saying, yeah, they're hella ageist at this company. So I'm not sure how much interior change happened, but at the very least, we did not have a horrifically damaging piece up on the website for all to see any longer. So we did that. Another thing, I had a friend who reached out to me who was unable to apply for a job because the application had a required field that said, when did you graduate from college? And the field would not let you enter anything earlier than 1990. So he was like, oh, this job looks great for me. I can't apply. I put a post up on LinkedIn, screenshotted. I actually double checked. I saw the same thing was true and posted it and was like, hey, what's up with this? This happened to my friend. And I didn't call out the name of the organization, but it went crazy, it went viral. And everyone was saying, oh, I see this all the time. This happens to me all the time as I apply to jobs. They require age by way of graduation date or something like that. And they specify at a certain time, right? So this is systemic. The company in question, they reached out to me directly and they said, hey, I'm sorry, this was actually a coding error. We have a new person on our team who's not familiar with the ATS, and we took a past internship role as we were putting together a product manager role, and we copied it over. The fields are all the same, and so thereby it started at 1990. And, while I said, hey, I don't think we should have age limits or bans or whatnot for interns either, because, why not you all saw The Intern with Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway. Like, why not have people who are at a different age or stage of their lives as interns? But regardless, like, I understand that that's a more common way. It's the norm, right? It's the norm is that you have a more recent college graduate. I think the average age of college graduates is 24 or something like that in the United States. So I get it. Don't love it, but I get it. Anyway, they changed it. They figured out the error. They changed it. Now anyone can apply to the job, right? So that happened. LinkedIn had a horrifically ageist job ad all over their site. And this is like the professional networking platform. And it took them 4 months to bring it down. Guys, we got this done in like a couple days, in certain cases, and actually less than that. It's like 24 hours. So our voices are being heard and there is change coming. I am thrilled to see it because we all have a vested interest in making this better. So we have gotten some significant things done as a community online, raising our voices, raising issues. I also want to point out something that's kind of a little bit of a bummer. And this was one that happened. People are just getting a little bit wild with what they're willing to say online, even on LinkedIn, which is a professional networking site with your full name and your employer listed. So it's quite bizarre. But I put a post up and it was about how there was an allegation of ageism at Hallmark. So a casting director said that she was pushed out due to her age and that the organization had made plenty of ageist remarks, including ageist remarks about 42-year-old star Lacey Chabert. So I did a video on it on LinkedIn. And one commenter who will remain nameless, and I'll get into why, he wrote on my post a comment. And it had his full name and employer, which is a Fortune 500 employer. And it said, and I quote, "Women over 39 are useless." Yeah, not okay, insane. And I immediately saw how hateful it was. And I screenshotted it and I deleted it and I blocked him. But I did want to share what had happened because I think that we need to show exactly how prevalent this sort of horrible thought is about women specifically, of course, but about older people. And hilariously, of course, the gentleman in question looked, by his face at least, to be over 40 or over 39. So that was interesting. But I made a post about it just to call out how prevalent this is. And I blocked out his name. I blocked out his face. I blocked out his employer because he doesn't need to be identified for it to have an impact for us to have this conversation. And this post went viral. People raked me over the coals for not identifying him, for not naming and shaming a lot of women too. And it was interesting because, everybody was so quick to jump on this guy who made a really stupid troll-like comment. And they were like, call his employer, get him out of here. And I just, honestly, I didn't feel good about that. For all I know, this guy could get fired for saying something so dumb. And I could have left it up. Maybe they would have found it. But I don't want to be the person causing pain. I don't want to be the person, who gets someone fired, who ruins a family. Perhaps he has people depending on him, right? So that was not what I was setting out to do. What I did do, however, was reach out to his employer and say, hey, someone on your team made this insane comment. it seems like you have a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. You have an ERG devoted to generations at this company, as well as an ERG dedicated to women at your company. You need some more training because this happened with someone at your company. And so my thought is that this could be a way to influence this person that wouldn't ruin his life. Because you know what? If I, as an over 39-year-old woman, go get him fired, do you think that's going to help how he feels about people over age 39, women specifically? I'm going to go ahead and guess not. So anyway, lots happening online, lots of momentum. I mean, this is really like, it's a movement. So I'm super excited about where this is going to lead, because in the short time we've been doing this, we've grown exponentially and we've been able to get some pretty cool stuff to happen. So none of that happens without you. Thank you. Thank you so much. One more thing I really want to call out that's super hopeful. So my past guest, Lori Pretzman, she was an internal Amazon recruiter. And on one of my very first episodes, I think it was episode 2 or 3, she shared a story of how she helped a candidate who was facing ageism, basically from her team, get into Amazon because she called it out. She said something. She saw something. She said something. Go listen to that episode, because it doesn't take much to make a difference in your organization. Lori Pretzman, who's now a career coach, she did that. She did that just by making a very small statement. There was very little at risk for her to do so. We need to begin to have the conversation about age at work, and it doesn't take a lot. If you see something, say something, okay? It can make a huge difference for your organization. You'll get access to a wider range of talent that will add immeasurably to your organization, and you'll impact that job seeker's life. Be open. Abolish the concept of culture fit, guys. I don't want to hear it anymore. It's so often used as a way to get older people out of organizations or preclude them from joining, right? Like, oh, not a culture fit. What's that even mean? More of the same? I'm over it. So please, we all have the power to stand up and say something like that. We all have the power to say, hey, this guy's experience is perfect. Or, wow, this woman, she's been doing a lot of cool stuff. You know, she has this and that. And, you know, push back when you hear terms like overqualified. What's that even mean? Okay. Older people actually have longer tenure in roles than younger people. So push back when someone says, don't you think he's going to retire soon? Push back. We have facts to support it too. I'm happy to supply you with any of them. So you can make a difference by standing up, speaking out. It doesn't have to be super grandiose. It can be very subtle. We can make a difference. You can make a difference. So please do it. All right, you guys, you did it. You made it to the end. Congratulations. So that was a sampling of the many, many things that I learned in the course of doing this show. It's certainly not exhaustive. Go back, listen to the rest of the episodes. You'll learn quite a bit more. But it was the best shot that I had at encapsulating the major learnings. Again, I'm sure I missed some stuff. I'm human. But huge, huge learnings from the first year and a half of doing the show. Can't wait to see what is to come in 2025. And with that, some exciting news. I am partnering with AARP, and we are having an event in the epicenter of tech in San Francisco. We are going to have a conversation with their Chief Information Officer, Najib Udin, and we're going to be talking all about the multi-generational potential of teams in the age of AI. It's going to be super cool. And that is on December 9th. It is a breakfast. It is a small, intimate event. A lot of the seats are taken because I've actually sent out the invitations early to my email list. That's a plug. If you're not on the email list, the newsletter, get on that. You get some early access to information because I only release every other week here on It Gets Late Early, typically. So if you want to be a little bit more in the know, hit me up there. Likewise, I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on the other platforms too, but the biggest community I have is on LinkedIn. So make sure you follow me on LinkedIn and you'll get access to these updates earlier. But super excited. AARP, obviously massive player. They're a huge advocate for workers and people over age 50. They do incredible work. I've cited them multiple times throughout this podcast and others. And there's a reason for that. because they do great work. So I couldn't be more thrilled to be partnering with them for this event. So if you are in the San Francisco Bay Area on December 9th, please let me know. You want to be there, 8:30 to 10:30. And it's in the heart of San Francisco in Soma. So let me know. Send me an email if you want to go. hello@itgetslateearly.com. hello@itgetslateearly.com if you want to go. And if we have room, we will let you join us. And if not, we will catch you next time. So please reach out. All right, one more announcement. After a lot of people reached out to me for help with their sort of career progression, job search, et cetera, and their mindset really about getting older and trying to work in corporate or tech, I realized that I really enjoy talking to people and doing this one-on-one. And so I'm actually going to open up a small number of beta sort of coaching opportunities to work with me. And so if that's something that you're interested in, to help you get ready for what's next, to help you figure out how to navigate this world of work over age 40 and beyond, I'm available for that for a select number of people. So if you are interested in that, again, please write hello@itgetslateearly.com, or you can go to itgetslateearly.com/collaborate, and you can send me a message there. But yeah, a select number of people I will be working with. But it's just been honestly a privilege to do this. I've met, like I said, an incredible number of exceptional human beings through doing this show. Couldn't be more grateful. So that's guests, community, audience, etc. Thank you. Just huge thanks. And there are big things coming in 2025, and I'm just I'm floored. So it's all thanks to you guys. And a final shout out. If you have not reviewed this show yet on Apple Podcasts, reviewed and rated, please do that. I am self-funding this show. This is a huge passion of mine, but I have to keep it afloat. And one of the best ways to do that is actually to review and rate the show on Apple Podcasts. So please, if you've gotten anything out of the show over the last year and a half, please do me a solid, please, and review it there, because we're rising in the rankings and things are growing, and it's just gonna make a world of difference. So with that, I'm gonna sign off for a little while, but please don't forget to follow me on social, especially on LinkedIn. I'm super active there. Also on Instagram, also even on TikTok. Like they said, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. I'm a millennial and I'm on TikTok. Okay, so just let's hang out. Let's hang out on social, and please reach out if something is of note. And I can't thank the people in the audience enough for, basically flagging stuff. Like my DMs are full of, I saw this ad and it was crazy, or, I got this thing when I was applying to a job and it was wrong. And, this company did X. It's cool. It's like, I'm back to my reporter roots and I love it. So thank you so much. And I'm going to see you in 2025, and we're going to make it a good one. So cheers.